Hi everyone. So last class we have been discussing about the asynchronous apex. There are four types of asynchronous apex: batch, queuable, future, right? Schedulable. So we were discussing those futures. I cannot see here. But last class we were discussing about the asynchronous and we have seen with the examples asynchronous apex. Each one of them we have seen and what are the differences between the queuable and future method, and we understood the basic part of the asynchronous, right? So today we will go ahead and learn about the new topic which is called as trigger, which is very important in the Salesforce trigger. Now let's go ahead and understand the trigger. What is the trigger? A trigger is an apex code that executes before or after a specific DML. DML statement, right? So what is the trigger? Trigger is, it is basically an apex code. When it is executed either in the before or update on the specific DML statement update is called as a trigger. Right, so trigger will have there are two different type of triggers available. One is before trigger and next one is after trigger. Before trigger and after trigger. Before trigger is nothing but trigger that executes before a data is saved to the database is called before trigger. Is called before trigger. Right. So what is a before trigger? Trigger that executes before a data is saved into the database. What is the usage of the before trigger? For data validation or for data processing or any pre-saving actions. Any pre-saving actions, we use the before trigger. Now next, what is the after trigger? After trigger is trigger that executes the after the data is saved into the database. After a data is saved into the database. What is the usage of after trigger? Usage is any type of process actions, any type of process actions that could be approval submission or like workflows, anything. Workflow actions or approval actions or in another scenario like email triggering, sending an email. So email action that you wanted to send the email to the customer or contact, whoever is the contact is there. So we use all these scenarios to in order to trigger. the after trigger. After trigger is means once the data is saved into the database, then we will trigger an email or we will do some updates on the workflow actions or approvals. Anything that we wanted to do after the trigger, we will write it into the after trigger. And these are the main thing. Whenever we write a trigger, before trigger, after trigger is very important. We have to, as a developer, we have to define when my logic is going to execute it. Whether it should be before the trigger, that means before saving to the database, do I wanted to validate anything, the data that is entered by the customer or user, or after the trigger, if I wanted to send an email to contact. So everything defined, designed by the developer, way to implement it. Now inside this, more into the next one, like trigger events, we have something called trigger events. Trigger events are depending on it's like a DML, right? So insert, what are the DMLs we have? Insert we have, and then we have a update, and then we have a delete. Insert, update, then we have a delete, right? Undelete. So these are the DML option that we usually see it. So inside the insert, trigger events there are two types of trigger events. Before insert, after insert. Now inside the update, again there are two types. Before update, after update. Now in the delete, before delete and after delete. Okay. In undelete, we only have after undelete. So these are trigger events. Trigger events are before insert, after insert, before update, after update, before delete, after undelete. These are called as a trigger events. How many are there? We have 7 trigger events. 7 trigger events. Now let me go to the paint and let's understand clearly on that. Okay. So for example, right now I have a Salesforce database. This is the Salesforce database. Right. So this is the SFDC database. I should that. This is SFDC database. Right. Now inside the SFDC database, data can come from multiple places. Multiple places means it can come from multiple sources. Like let's assume that data can come from Visual Force page. Data can come from data loader. Data can come from Apex. Data can come from API. Right? And data can come from Lightning Aura, and data can come from page layout. So a data can come from multiple sources or multiple tables. So what will happen? If user will come, okay, he will update the account details. So what will happen as soon as click on the save, it will go and sit into the database, right? From the API also, I'll get the data. And from Apex also, I'll get the data. And from the data loader, I can get the data. and VF also I can get the data, and Lightning also I can get the data, right? But at a time, how many data I can update or create it in the page layout? I can create one data. In terms of Lightning, how many data I can create it? If I have to create an account or update an account, one record I can update. Coming to the VF page, it can be updated only one record. Data loader, n number of records. Multiple data that is going to push together. And same thing Apex. I can create a collection data type like a collection of account, and I can insert all the accounts at a time. So the data will be multiple data that can come up. Coming to the API also will send multiple data to the database, right? So basically everybody is going to talk to the database, SFDC database. As soon as the record is created by the user or inserted by the user or updated by the user, multiple users can do the same record update multiple places, right? Now here, if you look at this, everybody is talking to the SFDC database, right? Before they touch to the SFDC database, right? We have something called, in the trigger, we have something called, which is a before insert or before trigger. This is a before trigger, right? After saving into the database, that is once it is saved into the database, then if I have to send any email, what it has to do, the trigger, it has to go to the database, collect the information from the SFDC database, and then send the email. But here before trigger, what it will do, like for example, I'm doing the data load. I'm pushing some 10,000 records to the database, or pushing the lead record and importing the lead record. Okay, that is going to create a new list. As soon as I push to the lead record, so what will happen? First thing, before it cross this red line, I wanted to cross verify whether all the data is perfect in the data loader or not. Whatever the data is there in the data loader, is it a perfect? Is there any mistakes? Or for example, I have a date field, but in the data loader Excel sheet, CSV has a string data, so which we do not want to accept it, or some data is not valid. Okay, as per the before trigger validation, there is some validation which needs to be cross verified. Date has to be greater than today. Okay, if that validation is there, it is going to cross verify before it pushing to the database. Before it is pushing to the database. So for everyone, whoever is talking to the database, if I want everything to be first cross verified by the trigger, then only if everything is perfect, then push it to the database. If you want that logic, then individual object has to be implemented trigger. Trigger is the best way to cross verify the data before pushing to the database. All right. And coming to the what kind of a data, like before inserting, like how can I know that what is happening here? So that is the part which will come here. DML, whenever I'm updating or doing something, like DML will come. I'm inserting, or user is inserting the data or updating the data or deleting the data, right? Or undelete. And also in the DML, we also have a merge and upset. DML has merge and upset, but coming to the trigger does not support the merge and trigger. It does not support the merge and upset. Trigger does not support these two. Trigger supports only insert, update, delete, undelete. Trigger supports only the DML, insert, update, delete, undelete. So in this, we have two types of DML. into the trigger. One is a before and another one is after. Everybody has before and after except the undelete. Undelete will have only the after undelete. This is after. Update also we have a before update, after update, and insert also we have before insert and after insert, right? So behind the logic to use the trigger is, this is the purpose we use the trigger. Anything that is touching to the database, if I wanted to make sure that validation or some, I wanted to calculate the interest, simple interest I wanted to calculate, or tax I wanted to calculate before it is pushing to the database. If I wanted to do those kind of a validation or those kind of a data, whatever the user is entering, based on that, if I get something incorrect information, throw back to the user. So those all things will come into the before trigger, right? So if in case in the trigger I do not have a before trigger, that means I do not have any validation check. Directly go ahead and push it to this SFDC database. But once it is pushed to the database, I have something logic on the after trigger. In the after trigger, what are the logic that I can do? I can do any actions like approval, sending an email, or what are the things like updating another related record, or these kind of actions. We can do that. And remember that every trigger has to be bulkified. That means trigger does not work for one data. Whenever you write a trigger, we use the list of trigger.new. I'll talk about that. But remember that trigger does not work for one data. Trigger has to work on the number of data. How much ever the data that is going to push it, for all of those data, it has to cross verify the information. Clear till this point why we are using the trigger, what is the behind story of trigger? Is everybody clear on that? Coming to trigger structure. For trigger structure, it starts with a trigger. Trigger name, on which object I am writing the trigger. So that object name, and here we will put the trigger events. Trigger events. And inside this, we will write the code, or whatever the code block, or whatever the logic is there. So the basic, ideally for the Apex class, it starts with the public class name, right? But for trigger, it starts with a trigger name on whatever the object you are implementing the trigger. If it is the account, you are going to implement the trigger, write the account here. If you are implementing the trigger on the contact, on contact. So whatever the object that you are implementing, that object name. So this is the trigger structure. Now let's go ahead and let's see one example. So let's say that business case is, if any record is created, let's assume that business case is, let's take the contact object. Okay. If any user update the contact record, I want to send an email. Send an email on the contact update. right? Let me go to the contact record. So we have a contact, okay, contact. There are multiple contacts should be there. Okay, let's take Padbury. Okay, as soon as I update the phone number on the contact, okay, if I update the phone number and click on the save, then I wanted to send an email to the user. Let them know that phone number is updated. Okay, this is the business scenario. So let me go ahead and create a one trigger. 5 new, not Apex class. We are not creating the Apex class. We are creating the Apex trigger. So click on the Apex trigger. So we are creating the trigger. So TR, today's date is 0507. Let's say that send email to contact, right? On S object, which object we are doing it trigger? We are doing it on the contact. Click on submit. So it created trigger name on contact object. By default, it will come as a before insert. By default, it will come as a before insert. But in our business case, we wanted to send an email once the data is saved into the database. So what I'll do is I'll simply use the after insert and after update. So on the insert and update, I wanted to send an email. Okay, for now the business case is only for update. So if I have only the scenario is for business case is only for update, use the after update, right? Now the logic what we are planning to write, we have to send an email, right? So we'll write messaging dot single email message m1 equal to, let's initialize this messaging dot single email message. So once the initialization is done, let's build the to address list of string to address new list of string. So I'll just take some random email address. Okay. So this is the email that should receive an email address that should receive an email. Now I do not want any CC address or BCC address because in developer org we have a limitations, only 10 emails I can send it in a day, right? So I do not want to use the CC address now. I'll go with the to address. Now we wanted to build m1 dot set m1 dot set. Let's set the to address. It is expecting the list param list of string. So that is this one to address. Now m1 dot. Next, let's put the set subject. Let me hard code the subject for now. Let's say that Apex trigger contact created, contact updated. And then let me build the body set plain text body. Contact record, contact phone number is updated. Okay, contact phone number is updated. Then finally we'll build the messaging.email. List of messaging.email. List of messaging.email. Let's initialize this. And finally we'll send messaging.send email. Send email, it is expected here. SE. Perfect. Now let's save it. So what are we doing here? In the trigger, I just written the code to send an email. I just written the code that will send an email. Okay. So this is the sample email address that I created. Let's see. So now I'm going ahead and updating the phone number here. 6112. Let's clear up the logs here. Let's say 6111. Save. Okay. So what happened right now? There are two logs got created. Let's see this log. This is the duplicate. PR_0507 send email address. Right, it built and sent an email address. Now let me go ahead and see. Let's refresh. It is taking some time. Maybe I have a duplicate record. Some rules, I have duplicate rules. So in order to understand, let me go ahead and print debug. Where am I adding the, okay. So the problem is, where am I adding the data? Fine, I build the message, I build the subject, I build the plain text body, everything is there. But where am I passing this, all the data that whatever I have built it, I did not pass it here in the email, right? It's a blank email. So what I have to do, I have to pass the data here. Whatever is I built, the data, it should be passed to the messaging.email. So now let's go ahead and system.debug. Save this. Clear log. Now let me go ahead and update the phone number. Save. Okay. How many logs it created? 2 logs it created. Right. So number of records to save. Send email to address it built. Debug. So yes, it built the data. So let me go ahead and see. See, there is a one email which came, contact phone number is updated, right? But here, even if I update the assistant phone number, okay, if I update the assistant phone number, also I'll get the same email. Whatever the data I update in the contact, it doesn't matter. It is saying here contact phone number is updated, but nowhere I'm not verifying anything whether the is it contact phone number is updated or is it any other phone number is updated. Because if I try to update this phone number or I'm updating the email, let's take another field. Okay, I'm updating the lead source web. Okay, I'll click on save. What will happen? My trigger is going to fire it. On save, my trigger is going to call. As my trigger does not have any conditions, it is going to send an email saying that your contact phone number is updated. But actually, I did not do any update on the contact. Right? I did not do any update on the contact. I just updated the lead source to web. So it should not trigger if I update the lead source or any other fields apart from the phone number. Right? It should not trigger that email. So basically, I have to add the condition saying that only check if my phone number is updated, then only go ahead and fire the email. Right? But coming to the real time, okay, now what I have done, I have written the logic inside the trigger. I have written the logic inside the trigger. But coming to real time, the flow, the structure of the trigger is will create a trigger, but trigger will not have any logic. Trigger class will not have any logic, no business logic inside the trigger. That means whenever we create a trigger, it's not a good practice to write a business logic inside the trigger. What you have to create? Trigger, trigger handler, and trigger helper. Okay. So this is the flow of writing the trigger as well as the best practices. You have to write a trigger. Trigger will call the trigger handler, and trigger handler will call the trigger helper. Right? So the trigger is going to call trigger handler is going to call the trigger helper. Now how the trigger is going to call the trigger handler? It is going to tell whether it is on update or on after update or on after delete or on after insert. Call the specific method inside the trigger handler. And trigger handler will also check some condition, whatever the starting condition, basic conditions are there. It will check the basic condition and it will call the trigger helper. Now here, if you look at this, only the trigger is apex trigger. And rest all are, these two are apex classes. This is the trigger class. This is apex trigger. Right? And trigger handler, trigger helper is, these are apex classes. These are apex classes. So we write a basic, the business logic inside the apex class. And trigger is going to call the apex class to execute the logic. Whatever the logic that I wanted to do, we can write it into the apex class. And I'll make sure that call that specific method from the apex trigger. So logic always has to be apex class. Trigger does not have any logic. Only the purpose of trigger is calling this particular apex method or the class just to make sure that it is executed whatever is needed based on the before trigger or after trigger. So this is the best way to write the trigger for the developer. So basically I have to take out this. Control X. Okay, now let me go ahead and create a new Apex class. Now I'll create a new Apex class here. This is for trigger, right? And the today's date 0507. And let's say that email trigger. Email trigger on contact, or you can say that whatever the name we have, right? Send email to contact helper. Send email to contact helper. Okay, this is the helper class. I'm directly creating the helper class instead of creating the handler and helper. But basic, the business logic sits in the helper. Now what I can do is I can simply whatever I remove the logic, I can put it here. Public, static. Let's create a void. Send email is the method. Send email. Control A, shift. Okay. So the same logic I have written here. Now it is saved perfectly fine. Now I can go and call this class from the trigger. From the trigger, I can call it dot send email. Right? I need not to initialize the helper class because it's a static. If it is a static method, I can directly call class dot method name. Right? Now what will happen? Whatever I was having here logic, I just moved into the Apex class. And I created a separate method for sending an email. And I'm calling that helper class dot send email. Right? This is what I'm doing. But in case if I have to pass the data, right? If I have to pass the data to the send email, let's assume that subject has, let me say that string name. And I need a name from the trigger because here in the subject so let me see less name less this, right? So hi, whatever the name I'm passing from the trigger, it should put it into the subject. And let me say, so here I can when I saved it, and if I try to modify this, it is going to throw me an error saying that there is a parameter which is requested there. Send email is having the parameter, or this method does not exist because this method with no parameters, the method which I have with the parameter. So I need to pass some name here. Samskara IT. Okay. Now let's say. Now what will happen if I try to update something on the contact? It is going to send an email, right? That's the same thing. But now I'm in the trigger, right? I am in the trigger. So whatever I'm doing it in the trigger, whether I'm updating it or modifying it, whatever action I'm doing in the trigger, how will I know an update has happened or an insert has happened? Who is going to tell me what is the status of that record? Whether it is perfectly inserted the record or whether it is perfectly updated the record? Who is going to tell me the information about success or failure? So there we have a concept called trigger context. Trigger context variable. Trigger context variables. So what is the triggered context variables is during the trigger run, during the trigger runtime, a variable that gives us the data. So when I say gives us the data, gives to the developers. During the trigger run, that gives us the data. What data it will give? Basically, we have a different trigger context variables, okay? But for now, let's understand only two. Is insert. One is insert. And next one is update. Is update. What is the trigger context? Is insert means it will return true if the trigger was fired due to an insert operation and it is successfully updated, right? If this trigger was fired due to the insert operation from the Salesforce user interface or Apex or API, that means this is on the insert equal to true. Whenever user is created the new record and clicked on save, is insert is going to tell us, okay, this is a is insert, that is true. Or if user is updating the record, okay, the right trigger context variable is update. Is update is going to tell, yes, this is for update, they are doing it. Right? Is update returns the true when it is updating the record. Is insert is going to give us the value true when it is inserting the record. Right? So these two will be fired based on the insert operation or update operation on the Salesforce user. It could be a Salesforce user is updating, it could be a Apex is updating, it could be a API is updating, whoever is updating that record. This is the flag which are going to tell us whether it is an insert or update. That means if I go to my trigger class, what are we doing here? We are just updating the record, right? So what I can do, I can put if trigger dot is update. If trigger dot is update, only execute this logic when it is a update. That means whenever I do the update, whenever I do the update, is update is going to be true. So that means this condition is qualified. Then it will go ahead and it will execute this logic. And I'm saying it only execute this business logic when you are going to update it. Right? So in case if I have a insert, okay, let me put here after insert. When I have a insert, so on insert, I wanted to send separate email. Trigger dot is insert. When the insert is true, if this condition is true, then send a different method. Let me implement another method here. This is for send email update, right? Let me implement one more method, which is a send email insert. Right here, I'll say that contact is phone number. Contact is created. Let's save it. Now on the update, I'll call the send update, send email update. On insert, I'll call the send email insert. Perfect. In case if I wanted to go ahead on the else condition, you can implement another method saying that something is wrong. You can put plain text body as something is wrong and you can create another method. Call that method in the else condition in case if you want. But right now we are interested only on the insert and update. Whenever the is insert is true, execute the send email insert, which has a different text. When I'm updating it, send different email. Right? Now this is going to send me an email. But here the thing is that I have a two triggers. One is a after trigger and after update. Right? And two triggers, after trigger and before trigger. Right? Now, in case if you wanted to identify, we will come to that more complexity there. But right now, let's understand is insert, is update. Where are we doing is insert? Insert, after update. If you want to be more clear on this, you can put trigger dot is after. Okay, and after insert, this is a after update. Trigger dot is after. So what? So both condition has to be true. That means is the user is after record is after saving it, like after update or after insert. So only those two conditions are qualified. The record has to be after and this is has to be insert. Then we can trigger this, right? Now till this point, any questions before I move on to the more complexity? Anybody has any questions before I move on?
Swapna.
Yeah,
So here you are declaring two events, right? After update and after insert.
right.
So can we declare both the condition in one if condition? Like if after is after is common and trigger insert and trigger update, can we
Yes,
perform those two events in one loop?
yes, you can do that. If you have a business logic that says that on the insert, on the update, you wanted to execute the same logic. In that case, what you can do is you just need a one method which is performing that logic, and you can call everything into the is insert, is update, same thing you can get it. This is not required for that. Okay, so if your business logic says that on insert, on update, I wanted to send the same email, no difference on that. So you can simply what you can do on the after, and when it is insert, then send this, or when it is update, send this. So you put or condition there. That is
Whenever
possible.
whenever we have a different criteria for each event, then we have to create different if conditions, right?
Right, right. Like if
Okay.
your business requirement says that you want a he want a separate email on the insert because that is a new record that is gets created. Or and there is another requirement which says that only on the update I wanted to send a different email that says contact is updated. Something like so the body has to be changed for the update and feature. So if there are two emails that needs to be sent or two logic has to be executed, then it has to be in different conditions.
Got it, Swapna. And another question, as of now, what you explained is you are calling the Apex controller class into trigger, right?
Yeah,
So we have a trigger framework also, right? So you will teach that one also?
yes, yes, that is coming. So let's understand how the logic is going to execute.
Yep.
So once we are clear, we will come to the trigger structure.
Sure, Swapna. Thank you.
Now, coming back here, this is definitely going to send an email. There is no doubt in that. But in case, let's assume that while sending the details, I wanted to cross verify whether phone got updated or not. Right now, I'm not verifying anything. I'm not passing the new record data to the class. I'm not passing the new record data to the here, right? This does not have anything. Nowhere it tells me that whether it is a contact record, whether it is a new contact record or old contact record, it doesn't tell me anywhere.
అమ్మాయి వాట్సాప్ అకౌంట్ ఉందా అండి జీమెయిల్ అకౌంట్ అయితే ఉందా
Can you mute yourself, please? So in that scenario, what we can do, for example, let's assume that I have an update. On the update, okay, I'm expecting something called list of contact. Okay, I'm expecting the contacts record because on the contact we have written the record. Let me save this. So these are new contact. like whatever the updated data is there, only updated data I want. So in that case, what I can do, instead of it, here we have something called trigger.new. So I'll explain later, but right now let's understand this. So if I say trigger.new, that means I'm going to pass the latest record. I need not to mention here the contact record or nothing. I need not to mention it because I'm already on the contact. I'm already on the contact. This trigger has implemented on the contact. If I say trigger.new means it is going to definitely pass the list of contact. It is definitely going to pass the list of contact. Okay, so here I'll say that contacts of 0.I. Let's say this. What we have written on the update. Perfect. Okay. So let me update some data on the contact. I'm not updating anything on the field. Okay, I'm just updating some other data. Let's say I'll change the lead source to the phone inquiry. So as soon as I changed it, it is going to trigger another email. Right here in the subject, I could see that hi, this is the contact ID, Apex trigger contact. Right? What did I do that? I just updated the existing one. So which one it fired? It fired only the one update. Only the one which is update send trigger. Right? Contact is updated. Here I have the Apex trigger, hi, contact ID, Apex trigger, contact updated. I did not receive the contact created. I did not receive that because I did not create a new record. I just updated the old record. So that's the reason only one record got up, only one email which executed on the update. So which is correct. Now let me go ahead into the Apex class. Now this is firing perfectly fine. So far we sent 3 emails. 1, 2, 3, 3 emails we sent. Okay, 10 emails are the limitations. Okay, perfect. So now on the send update, I'm getting the contact record, right? I'm getting the contact. Now what I can do here, I can just cross verify for loop contact CON contact. I'm looping for that record because I just wanted to cross verify if con dot phone number. This is the standard phone. I can say that not equal to none. Should have some data. But how am I comparing whether I have a old value or the new value, whether it is really updated or not? With simply trigger.new, I cannot identify the information, right? I need to send the old information also. So in that case, what we can do that trigger.old map. So with this, what will happen? I can get what is the old data that is that was there on the contact. I'll explain this again tomorrow also, but today just to make you understand that. So what I can do is with this old contact, okay, with this old contact I can cross verify whether the old value is same or not. Okay, maybe today is too much for that. I'll explain it tomorrow. Okay, let's keep this aside. Okay. So whatever the data I update on the contact, I'm receiving an email. I'm receiving an email. And for first method, we are passing the string. And for the second method, I'm passing the trigger.new, which is a new value. And then I'm passing the trigger.old, which is a old value. Okay, this should be it should not be a list, it should be always one. Because this is the old one. Okay, for now it is too much. So far is it clear, right? So what are the data I want? I can pass the data from the trigger to specific method. Either it could be a string or integer or whatever the list of the contact or record information I can pass. If I want the record information, trigger.new is the one which will be passed. Now, it is better and good for the developer if we can implement one trigger for one object. Like, is there any limitation how many triggers I can create in one object? There is no limitation. You can create triggers. There is no limitation on that. But it is a good practice if you can implement only one trigger on the one object, because tomorrow, after certain months or certain year or next year, if I wanted to cross verify, if you have a 10 triggers on the contact object, okay, if you have a 10 triggers and there is a small issue which happened on the production side after 1 year, okay, when that issue raised it, you have to check all 10 triggers to identify where is that flag it is verified, in which trigger it is verifying that flag. You have to cross verify all 10 triggers, right? Instead of doing that 10 triggers, it is better to go with the one trigger, one object. So the good practice is go with one trigger. One trigger for one object. Like contact, create only one trigger. Or if you have any object, okay, just implement only one trigger. Within that trigger, you can do whatever the logic you want and you can call multiple Apex classes. It is up to you. But start with only one trigger. Now coming to interview questions. What is a trigger? This is the basic for interns or whoever newly coming to the Salesforce. They will ask what is a trigger. Okay, and the next one is what is the trigger syntax, or they will tell us. Anybody has any question? Write a trigger syntax or structure of the trigger. And what are the variant events? What are the various events on which trigger can fire? What are the various events? And then next one, what are the different types? What are the different type of triggers? And what are the context variables in trigger? There are 7 other context variables. When do we use? Before, Trigger. When do we use? After trigger. And what do you mean by the bulkifying trigger? What do you mean by bulkifying trigger? So basically bulkify is nothing but trigger should be able to handle could be a single record or 1,000 records. Whatever the records are there, the trigger should be able to handle all the records. And coming to real-time use, real-time is, so there is something which says that use a trigger to perform a task that can be done by the, like when to use trigger. So in real time, like they will, when you go for the interview, okay, they will tell some business scenario and they will ask which are the possible ways you can implement this particular logic. And they will give the options: trigger, process builder, lightning flows. These are the three things which they will give. And if you say trigger, why do you go for the trigger for that business logic? Why did not you go for the process builder? Why did not you go for the workflow? So remember one thing, when to go with the trigger, okay? Use only that, you have to use the trigger, whether it could be an interview or if you are working in a project where you have to take a decision which one to go. So remember this, use a trigger to perform the task or the requirement. Perform the task or the requirement that cannot be done by using the point and click. Point and click tools in the Salesforce. Let's take, for example, you wanted to calculate the sample interest rate. Or you can say then that when we have a complex business logic, what is the complex business logic? Like I wanted to take 4 or 5 field information. Okay, I wanted to take 4 or 5 field information, and based on the 4 details, I wanted to validate and calculate the sum of them. So in those scenarios, I can go with the trigger. So whenever we have a complex business logic that cannot be done by the lightning flows, that cannot be done by the processing flow, in processing builder, anyway the processing builder is going away right now, which cannot be done with the lightning flows. Okay, the logic, the business logic, calculation, modifying some data or combining the data, which we cannot do, or sending in sample email template. Okay, so I do not want to use the email alert. I just wanted to use the email template and send an email. I can do with the trigger and calling the app is called the email template. Lightning flows only with the email templates we cannot do. I have to create an email alert, another one, and I can call that email alert in the lightning flows. So there are different ways are there which when to go with the trigger. Okay, it's you have to decide which one is the best. Fine, so far is it clear? Any questions?
Swapna. So what if that logic will we can achieve through process builder and the triggers in case? So in that scenario, how we can approach that?
So that's what I'm saying. If your business requirement is simply straightforward, saying that okay, verify the status equal to, if the status equal to in progress, update the owner field to the current user. If this is a simple straightforward. If you have this kind of a scenario, you can go with the process builder. Right, trigger is not required. But if you have a logic saying that status equal to in progress, then get the related child data and verify few fields on the related child record and update the custom field to the equal to the contact status plus some other field. If you have these conditions, I'm just giving random example. So you will understand when you get the requirement, you will understand. But one thing I wanted to let you know that process builder is going away. So you will not have a process builder, no more process builders going further. They are going to replace with the lightning flows. Yeah. So once you get the picture of the trigger, okay, once you understand the concept behind the logic, the trigger, why to use and everything, if you know basic thing about the trigger, you will be able to judge it. When you get the requirement, you will be able to in a position to judge it, whether should we go with the process builder, should we go with the trigger. Because every scenario will not be the same. Okay, every company will not have the same scenarios or same logic. Everywhere it is going to be changed. If you have a 10 flows which are having the every individual flow is triggering on the contact. Simply they say that okay, it's a lot of flows we have on the contact. Why don't we combine and put it into the trigger? So they will say that. The same logic you can do it in trigger also, but they say that flows is more complexity. We have like there are 10 or 20 flows are there on the contact. So it is very hard to go through the each individual flow whenever we get an issue. So can we remove the flows and put it everything into the trigger so that developer can handle whatever will happen. So this is another scenario we can say that. Fine. Is that answer to your question?
Yes, Swapna. Thank you.
Yeah. So coming to the assignment, create a trigger on custom object interview. Okay. So for this, pre-requirement is you have to create a interview object. Okay. And create the fields. Status will have the pick list values. New, in progress, done. Okay. Create a trigger on custom object. Whenever the status equal to done, then send an email. Send an congratulations email saying that you are selected. Give the another field here, which is organization. Okay, this should be a text field for whatever the organization name is there in the field, you have to send that. Clear? So this is the requirement. Create a trigger on the custom object interview. Whenever the status is done, then send an email saying that you are selected for this organization.
Swapna, that organization value, we should not hard code it, right?
No, you can enter on the record. Like whenever you are creating the interview record, enter the organization there. This field is entered by the user. This is a text field. You'll be creating the text field on the object interview, and whenever you are creating the interview record, status should be new and the organization is XYZ, and save that record. On saving, nothing should happen, right? But whenever you change the status equal to done, it should send an email.
So we has to create another field email also, right?
Yeah, email. The data type is email. Any questions? Anybody has any questions? Okay then, yeah, thank you. I'll send this information to you, whatever the recording session is there. Please will forward that. Thank you everyone.